All right. Good morning, everybody. How you doing today? Back for another episode, another stream of Road to Reinvent 2019. We've been doing a few of these. I already threw up the link in the comments here on LinkedIn, where you can go back and check all of the previous episodes. Post them there to YouTube along with a transcript, so you can kind of go through on your own pace, and obviously you can review them here on LinkedIn if you can manage to find them in my feed. That's one of the frustrations with LinkedIn. Great way to connect with people. Really hard to kind of track activity outside of the normal course of the day. If you have any questions while we're going through this, as always, fire them up here in the LinkedIn chat. I am monitoring it. I have this system sort of down at this point where I can see them in the live chat. I will respond to them live on the stream here, and if you have suggestions for future content, go for it. The next episode will probably be Friday, maybe Monday, depending on scheduling. I'm going to double check on that. But we're going to go a little higher level. Right now, we've been diving into specific services. We're going to talk a little bit about strategy, how to build, how to pick what you're going to build in the next episode. But more on that later. So a little bit of housekeeping. Today, shockingly enough, is already October 2nd, October the 2. October 15th is when reserved seating goes live for AWS reInvent. And that means that if you are interested in getting a seat in a particular session, then that's what you need to be looking for on your calendar. I'm just pulling up the website here in the background. They don't actually have it up on oh, yeah, they do. Okay, so let me flip over to that right away and show you this as it goes. Let me just make sure I just show that one window. All right, so you see here the session catalog is already live for reInvent. So if you have a ticket, you can log in and start starring sessions. Say you're interested in this. Check through what you want. On October the 15th, are they going to say that on the main page here? No, they're going to, we'll go back to the main page. You'll see here, October 15th. Can't highlight it because it's an image, but October 15th is when that reserved seating actually opens up, which means if you want to actually get a seat, if you want to see these sessions live, you got to be on the ball on October 15th. 10%, or I think 10 to 15% of all the seats in each session are held back for walk-ups. And 10 minutes before session time, if you as a reserved seat person have not showed up, your seat gets released to the walk-up line. The biggest disappointment most people have for reInvent is not actually getting to the sessions they want. So remember October 15th. We are going to be coming back to that several times to make sure that you do not forget, because it's absolutely critical that you get into those seats. I'm actually giving a couple talks. I'll give you that information on the website in the coming days. But go into the session catalog now, flag I'm interested in this, and it'll create a little short list that makes it easier to book your sessions. So back to today. We're going to go for about 25 minutes or so. We're going to go around 10:30. We're going to talk into two of my favorite services, and I probably say that way too often, Amazon Athena and Amazon Quicksight. Now, these are sort of lesser known services, but I think they're extremely important. So let's put up some time on the clock. You can see that in the bottom right corner, and we're going to switch back over to the browser, and we're going to go through and we're going to see what's going on. All right. So Amazon Athena, first of all, is a query service. It's the way that you can treat data in S3 like it was in a database. Why would you care? Why wouldn't you just put your data in a database? Well, S3 tends to be really inexpensive to store large amounts of data. And there's a great life cycle behind S3. We covered that in the previous stream when we talked about S3. But the thing about Athena is that it queries all of your data in place. So you don't have this process where you're putting data in S3, then you're pulling it out to either an EC2 instance or locally, or pushing it into another database to do work on it. Athena lets you work on it where it is. Now that can have cost savings. That's definitely far more efficient from an operational perspective. From a security and privacy perspective, I like it because the data stays where it is. You don't need to pull the data out. So we're going to dive into Athena, and we're going to see what happens, because a lot of people think it's really complicated, and it can be. Excuse me, I need to take a sip of my way too hot tea. And I should have known that. The little bear shows up when the bear shows up driving, it's too hot. Should have looked for that. So with Athena, we're going to dive in and do a very simple, basic thing to connect to Quicksight. And we'll tackle Quicksight as the second part of this. So I've already cheated a little bit Sorry, but bear with me. Basically, I already uploaded a big file because I didn't think you guys would want to watch me upload a file into S3. So we have our bucket that we made previously, Road to Reinvent. We've created a folder called GeoNames, and we've uploaded this 1.4 gigabyte text file. 1.4 gig in one text file. Now, this is the least optimized way to do this, but I wanted to demonstrate the power. So 1.4 gig of pure uncompressed text is a lot of text. Okay, what is in here is actually a significant amount of information about places. So it's from a site called geonames.org. They freely license this out for research. I believe potentially for commercial use as well, but we're doing it for educational and research purposes right now. And essentially what this is in our 1.4 gigabyte file, we have a whole bunch of lines, and every single line has these properties to it. So there's 19 different properties for every single line. We have a name, we have alternative names, we have the longitude and latitude of where, whatever it is we're talking about, the features of it. So there's some mapping information here, population, elevation, and the time zone that it's in, and then the date of the record. So basically what you have is something like a city. So say like Ottawa is at, longitude and latitude, blah, blah, blah. It's at elevation, and it has a population of 950,000 people. We have that over and over and over and over again. In fact, if I just double check this, .txt, I'm just running, there's hundreds, 11 million, just shy of 12 million lines in our text file. Okay, just shy of 12 million lines. So obviously, that's a lot of data. And what we're going to do is we are going to use Athena to query that data. So we're going to say we have 11 million lines or 12 million lines of city data in this S3 bucket. What we are going to do is go over to Athena. Now, because I've already used Athena, I get jumped right into the default setup, which is basically you've got databases on the left-hand side and we've got queries on the right. What we're going to do is create a new database, I believe, or create a new table. Create a table from an S3 bucket. That gives us the new wizard, so we can walk through this. So we're going to create a new database. We're going to call this Road to Reinvent GeoNames. That's our database name. Table is places. Yay! Now we give it an S3 URL. So in this case, it's Road to Reinvent /GeoNames. So the interesting thing here is that, so we've given our database a name, just in this case, Road to Reinvent GeoNames. We're going to call this table places because of the info we're putting in there is just a bunch of places. And what we have now is an S3 folder. So you need a folder because by default, Athena will treat everything in that folder as one big database. So we have one file in our folder and that's okay. What would be more efficient for both Athena and for pricing, which we'll cover in a second, would be if instead of one big file, we had those files broken up by, let's say, first letter. So some way that Athena could index them better. But in this case, we're just going to give it one big giant file. It's not an encrypted data set. If it was, you can actually pass it a key and say, use this key to decrypt it. But we simply click the blue next button. Oh, and I forgot. Lower, we need the little underscores, not the hyphens, I believe. Yeah. Let me double check. There we go. Okay, so fixed some quick little things. Now, next question is data format. What's that text? What do those text files in that bucket look like? In this case, we have a bunch of default formats. You can see there's things like JSON documents. Parquet is an optimized format for Athena, which is great. It's used in some other stuff like Hive. But we have TSV, which is tab separated values. You could also CSV, comma separated values. In our case, there's a tab between every field. So name, tab, next field, tab. That's what we're going to use, TSV. And then Athena is going to say, well, wait a minute, what are all these columns? If we separate each line up by tabs, what do we have? And in this case, I've already pre-populated this. To make it easier, I'm going to say bulk, and I'm going to just paste this in. But you can see we have the name of the column, in this case, the GeoName ID, and then the type, it's an integer. Next column's a place name. Little bear's still driving, so this is hot. The next is a place name, and that's a string. So very simple. You can do this by hand as well, but because we have 19 fields, I just pre-populated it. I'm going to click add, and you'll see it populates it into Athena's very simple column name and the type. If we wanted to change it, we could select a different type here. But we've already mapped this out, so we scroll down to the bottom, and now we're going to click the blue next button again. Now I know this is kind of in depth. This is kind of a little more technical than we've gone, and I think that's okay. I think this is just, this introduces some of the power of Athena, some of the interesting facts of Athena, but the next part is going to be what we're setting up to, which is the Quicksight part. So we click the blue create table, and you can see this takes a second. It actually gives us the query that it has created to build this table. So if we want to save this, we can. If we want to rebuild this at any time, but we're just going to click on the new query button here, or on the new query tab. And you can see on the left-hand side under tables, we have our places table with all of the things in here. Now, if we want to preview this, we click on the three dots, we click preview table. Now this is going to give us a default query, which is select star from our database, places table, give me the 10 records, limit of 10. And if you scroll down here, you'll see that it's already pulled these out. I'm going to go out on a limb and say these are probably in Iceland or in Greenland. They're somewhere in the Nordic region based on the language. But if we want to, what we can do is write our own query. So we could say where place name like New York. There. Okay, so what I've done here is we say select star or select everything from our database name, our table name, where the place name, so the name of the place, is like New York. Now the little modulus, the little percentage sign, means New York just needs to be in there somewhere. There can be stuff before it, there can be stuff after it, right? So it's a great way to search, sort of a fuzzy search for text. And if we click run query, you're going to see at the bottom, it's running the query. It took about a second to go over those 12 million lines, which is pretty amazing. And then we have all of our these things. So we have place name New York. We have all of these items in New York. So you see there's a lot of hotels in this database. New York, New York, New York Palace, Fairfield Inn. So there's all these different places within New York. But we're getting a ton of information here. So what we're actually going to do is we're going to get a little pickier. So we're going to say, give me place name, give me latitude, longitude, elevation, population, and time zone. So that, if we click the blue run query button again, is going to give us just a little better filter. Right? So here we've gotten rid of a bunch of the junk. Standard SQL, right? This is standard database querying. And that's really the key takeaway from Athena, is it lets you treat text files or JSON documents or Parquet files, all these files that are sitting in S3, you can treat them just like a normal database, okay? Now, you guys might be thinking, okay, that's way too technical. Why are we doing this? Does this really matter? Well, there's one last step in Athena, and then we're going to get into the really cool stuff. So if I click create, I can actually create a new table or a new view from this query. So what I'm going to do is create a new table. I'm going to keep it into my current database. I'm going to say New York places, places in New York. And then my output bucket is going to be the same. Okay, so my output location, and then it tells you which format it's going to put them out. If you're going to just leave it in Athena, stick with the default of Parquet because that's going to be the least expensive. Yeah, it's going to write this in. We say create, and now it's actually written another database for us, another table for us, or it's still crunching on that. Once it finishes that, we should see another table over here. Now, before we wrap up Athena, the one thing I wanted to point out was that this can be very expensive. If we look at Athena pricing, you're going to see that the price is actually run per query. So it's $5 in US East per terabyte of data scanned. So every time we're running a query right now, we're scanning 1.5 gig of data. So we can only run just shy of what? We can run 900 or so queries before we're charged $5. That's because we just dumped all of our data into one big text file. If we had broken our data up or put it in a better format, then we wouldn't be going across all of it all the time. We would be able to reduce that query cost down significantly. So in this case, our adding failed because the place already exists, because I was running tests previously. Sorry. But you get the point, is that you can save out the results of queries as smaller tables, and then that makes it cheaper to query things repeatedly. So if we have our big data set, then we know we want to do a lot of work with the stuff in New York, then we can reduce the cost by outputting just the New York results as a whole new table. Then we only query that, because now we're doing way less information. We'd go from our 1.4 gig down to a couple hundred kilobytes, and that would give us way cheaper queries as we move forward. All right, we got 12 minutes left. We're going to flip over to the next part, and I think this is far more interesting because Quicksight is all about visualizing your data. It is a data visualization service. It is, interestingly enough, it was the very first AWS service to use its own top-level domain, .aws. If you go to quicksight.aws, you'll get pushed into that. Essentially what it does is you have a bunch of data. Use Quicksight to look at it. You can make interactive dashboards, email reports, you can do analytics. So we're going to do that right now. We're going to switch over to Quicksight. So if we go to services, we go to Quicksight. This is going to pull us through. Now, this is the first time this account has ever been using Quicksight. So it's going to ask us to sign up for it, which is just enabling it on this template, and you can see, or on this account, you can see there's actually charges for Quicksight, right? So very clearly, if we start this, first author with a gig of data is free. Team trial is 60 days, and after that, you're paying per additional author. So be aware of the costs. But for one author with 1 gig of data, it's actually free. So we're just going to click continue. We're going to give ourselves a unique name. We're going to give ourselves our email and notification address. We are going to automatically discover some data. We are going to let Quicksight access our S3 bucket. So this, you'll see here, is the data sources for Quicksight, because it needs to pull data to visualize from somewhere. We're going to give it access to our S3 bucket that we are using for this whole seminar, for all these things. And we just click finish, and it's going to create our account. Now, while it's creating that account, in the background, it's just setting up all the permissions that we need. You'll notice I didn't say give all access to S3. I just said to that one bucket, which is a really, really good practice. You want to restrict it. So Brian's got a great question here, asking of whether Quicksight is similar to Power BI. It is, but not as mature. So Quicksight is very much about visualizing data and making some interactive dashboards. There is some really cool, powerful stuff here. And depending on what you're using Power BI for in Microsoft, you may find what you need here. I think this is far more powerful and flexible, but you got to do a lot more work to get stuff out of it. But you'll see as we go here, Brian, and keep up the question if you have a specific one around Power BI. But I think I would say just maturity-wise, Quicksight's not there yet, but it definitely has the potential. So we get this nice little welcome dialog because it's the first time we've ever been here. Hey, it lets us quickly visualize and analyze my data, connect to your data, super fast performance, visualize and analyze, right? Share insights with anyone. And that's really the key here, is that we can set up insights and then send them along. So we have some default analyses if we'd like to, and let's just click in that for a second. This is an analysis of website and social media. It's pre-made. This is just a sample database. And you can see here that we've got website visits graphed out over time with website page views, mailing list subscription data. So somebody's gone through and actually made this dashboard of free versus paid signups, Twitter mentions and follows. Pretty straightforward, standard analytical stuff, right? So you can experiment around, you can play around with this and see what you want to do. In our case, what we're actually going to do is we are going to go back to the main, and we're going to start a new analysis. So we're going to say new analysis. We are going to create a new data set. I'm going to just increase the size of this a little bit so that you guys can see it. So we can upload files directly. We can connect to a number of services, including Salesforce, S3 Raw, Athena. So that means we could take our data from S3, we could carve it up better in Athena, and then process it there. So what we're actually going to do is we're going to connect to Athena because we've already told Athena how our data is stored. So we could also go to Twitter. We could do Twitter analytics, which is pretty cool. But we're going to say Athena. The data source name is going to be GeoNames. We're going to create a new data source. So it's loading my table. And now I need to connect to my Athena thing. You'll notice this is the exact same. Road to reinvent GeoNames is what we made in Athena. It's loading that up. It says there's one table, which is places. That's the one we want. We click select. So if we have more than 25 million rows or over 25 gig, this could fail. So if it fails, we're going to see what's going on. So we could import it or we could directly query. In our case, we know we're over the limit, so we're not going to import it directly into Quicksight, even though that would be faster. We're going to directly query the data, which is a little more expensive, but it's going to be more useful for us. So one of the things we have is in our data, we have longitude and latitude, which gives us the ability to do geospatial analysis, which means where is it on a map? This may or may not work. We'll see. But hey, look, it worked. That's always good. You never know with this stuff when you're doing it live whether it's going to work or not. So this is a little slower because we are doing it we're not doing it in Athena itself. So let's maximize that. There we go. So because we're pulling right from Athena, we're not pulling it from Quicksight. But you can see every one of these dots is actually a place in our data set. So remember when we had New York and there was a bunch of items in New York? This is where it has mapped all of these things out. So you can see each of these dots. This dot has 4 places in there, right? Very quickly, all we did was point in our data and said, hey, by the way, there's geospatial data in here, right? So we can give a size as well, which we have population, which gives us our size. So now we have not only are we mapping it on the map, but we've also given a size of dot. So if we scroll this a little bit, you'll see our dots, a bunch of them changed. Now it's really tricky to kind of see. Let me zoom in here. So there we go. That's getting better. So you can see that the dots are changing transparency based on how big they are, right? So we can see now we've got population. So we have New York tagged with population. We've got Newark tagged with its population. And that's how we very simply are doing a geospatial analysis, right? So all we did was we dragged from this list of our data and we put it into the right fields. Very simply done, right? So if we rename this is a map. That's really handy. Let's create a second analysis. So let's do something like, let's do a scatter plot. So we'll click a scatter plot, and now we have x-axis and y-axis. So let's go by population to elevation. And then we're going to group by country code. So we'll see how big things are based on population on the x-axis and elevation on the y-axis, and then we'll see the country. So we see way up here, the U.S. has the number of U.S. items. So the population is obviously a sum of all the population figures. So it's not the actual country population, and a sum of the elevation. So there's far more entries in the U.S. rather than somewhere like empty. Empty has a bunch of stuff with no elevation tagged. You can see India here has low elevation, but a bunch of entries included. So the interesting thing here is that we've spotted that our data is not rolling up the way we would expect, right? What we want to see is instead of a total of everything grouped by country code, we want to see just the spread of population versus elevation for items. So because we were grouping it, we were actually changing the data. It was rolling up everything in that country code, which is not accurate. There's not 26 billion people in the United States. But here, we now start to get a little bit more, if we group this, sorry, let me add one more thing. If we group by ASCII name, so by name, what we should see is a little more readable data. Right, so now we're still graphing by population and elevation. So population along the X, elevation along the Y. In this case, we're grouping it together. So now we've got a different distribution. So if we look here, we got 40 million people in this particular area, which looks to be, let's see if that's going to load up a second. So we get these different ways of playing around with our data, right? In the case of our, there we go. In the case of our our particular data set, that is not fast at all. In the case of our particular data set, it's a grouping of places with some data about those places. So in that case, what makes the most sense is that map, that first map we did. But playing around with the scatter plot, maybe we find something interesting, a cute little fact that we can use for something else. But it's very simple to, and did this just kill everything? Ooh, this might have killed everything. Whew. That's a first on the stream. I've never had Chrome lock up on me. And then again, Chrome's not my normal browser. But so the point is, Quicksight makes it really, really simple to visualize our data no matter where it is from. There we go. All right, it's responding again. Cool. Makes it really easy for us to visualize our data no matter where it's from. In this case, what we did was we took a bunch of data that was sitting in one big honking file in S3. We created an Athena query to make that a little more understandable. And then we pulled that Athena query into Amazon Quicksight. And with 2 or 3 clicks, we made a map that mapped out all of our data. Here we go again, right? If we look at this, so we maximize it. Right, we look at all of our data and we can see very clearly, you know, sort of how things break up across these places. So if you wanted to dive into the Netherlands and see what's going on, what places are in Amsterdam, we've got that, right? So very, very simply put, you can walk through the sample stuff. There's a ton of different chart types. There's a ton of different ways to connect data into Quicksight. In the back end, here's what's really, really interesting. This data is still just sitting in that one file in S3. We haven't moved it, right? We didn't move it at all. We sit in S3, we query from Athena, and we visualize in Quicksight. We did it in under 20 minutes or under 30 minutes, right? Very simply, we made some mistakes along the way. We're going to keep making some mistakes. But I think this is just kind of gives you some of the idea of what is possible with these tools. And the beauty is, the Athena queries, you need to make sure that you understand how it queries to keep the price down. So again, we started with a big data set. We could chunk that up with other queries and saying like, just give us the New York stuff, give us the US stuff, whatever that case may be. Save those queries back into S3 as optimized files, which will reduce the cost because now we've gone from 1.5 gig down to like a couple hundred kilobytes. So our cost goes way lower because remember, it's $5 for every terabyte you query with Athena. That can add up very, very quickly. So cut up that data and then we pulled it into Quicksight to start looking at what's going on. Now, Quicksight has a pretty generous free tier, and then it's, I believe, $9 a month or $12 a month for additional authors, and then you pay per gig as well. It can start to add up, but it's also extremely powerful. Now, think about pulling in sales data instead of just like an open data set that we did. If you're pulling in your sales data or log data, if you go back to these samples, right? So we go people overview analysis. This is just a breakdown of employees by region, hiring by region. You can very easily create these kind of visualizations and then click the share button, publish this out or share it. You can also capture this right into a storyboard, which is you can download or you can just view full scale like this. Very, very simple to do, very, very easy to do. If you go to the sharing options, you have the ability, let's just click back in here. You have the ability to publish this dashboard and then give people the ability to play around with it or not, depending on what you want. And you can set a whole bunch of permissions around that. So you don't need to make it public. You can just share it within your team. So that was a quick glance at 2 very, very powerful AWS services. The key here is that they leave the data where it sits in S3. You need to be aware of that pricing, like I've said repeatedly, because it is really important. I don't want you to get hit by a big bill unexpectedly. But from a privacy and data perspective, your data only ever stays in that one bucket or in those areas in S3 where you have control over it. And then you make sense of it with Athena and with Quicksight, and you can share it out. Now, also, the interesting thing with Athena is that it then is a standard database output. It's a standard database connectivity, which means if you didn't want to use Quicksight, you can actually plug Excel into Athena. You can go to Excel and say new data source. It's a relational database. It's here and give it the details for Athena as long as you set up the permissions correctly. And all of a sudden now from Excel, you're querying your data that's sitting in S3. That's really, really powerful stuff. It's also the beginning of the AWS data pipeline. You're going to see that come up at reInvent. The last 2 years, Werner has spent a good chunk of his keynote talking about the AWS data lifecycle and the data pipeline. You probably heard the term data lakes. That all starts with S3. Athena and Quicksight are extremely powerful tools on top of that. Okay. Hopefully this has given you a bit of a taste. Thank you very much for your comments. I appreciate the feedback. Thank you, Brian, for the feedback and the great question. I will continue to monitor this thread, as always, to see if there's additional questions. I'm publishing this video over on YouTube and then again on my website. So if there's additional questions or suggestions, let me know. We're looking for future topics as well. We've got 60 days before reInvent, but the next big major timeline, October 15th. Make sure you are on board for October 15th so that you can get your seat in the sessions that you want. The way to start doing that is log into the session catalog right now and start flagging the ones you're interested in as I'm interested, the little star. That creates a quick list over on the side. I'll be giving a couple talks at the show. I'll put that info up on my website shortly. But thank you for joining me today. I really appreciate it. I hope you are set up. I hope you learned a little bit here, and I hope you are set up for a fantastic Wednesday. We'll talk to you soon as I launch my pen at you. Not aggressively, hopefully. Have a great day.